You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 513, our Ready for Ahsoka series. Now, the second episode in this series, where tonight we're going to focus on Hera Syndulla, who is a character that is been in a lot of Star Wars things, but I think if for the average layman, general public audience member, it's the reference that was in Rogue One over the PA system when they were on Yavin. And that might be it. So give me the thumbs up that I did get that correct. Is, as always, Jonesy. Jonesy's with us tonight. Jonesy, welcome to the show. Let me say your name one more time. Jonesy, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. And actually, my little headliner thing is Spectre Niner. So some of you will get that reference, but maybe not all of you.
Yeah.
How are you today? You're a little rattled.
I'm a little rattled. I mean, this show is being held together right now by duct tape and chicken wire, but you know it's been par for course for the last 6 years or so. So, you know, nothing abnormal going on here. But hey, before we get started, we've already got people running around the chat, and we've got some special people to thank for supporting the show.
Yeah, let's switch up a little bit. So yeah, thanks to the people who are in the live stream. If you are curious about watching the live stream, if you're listening to this, thank you for downloading it. But we would invite you to come out to cantinacast.com/YouTube. We'd love if you liked and subscribed to the channel so you get notified when we go live. A special thanks to Rob, Sky, Steph, Jacob, Jeff, Skywalker's Academy for showing up and already having chat in the chat. Man, see, I get confused if I do this out of order too. But anyway, special thank you to our Patreon members, of course, cantinacast.com/Patreon if you're curious about all the amazing things we do. Later tonight, we're going to do a Tatooine's trading post, which we haven't done in a while. Albert has about 5,000 things to share, so strap in for that one. He gets to edit that nightmare. But but a sincere thank you to all of our now part of the tribe members: Mike, Rob, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, Steve, and Rita Reborn. And then our Delusions of Grandeur members, our top tier members, Rod, CJ, and Alex. Thank you all so much. Again, cantinacast.com/Patreon if you are curious about any of our tiers. A lot of great exclusive content, especially as we get into Rebels. Some interesting things coming up here in the next several weeks as well, so we'll just tease that. And then also over on the YouTube channel, so we'll jump back over to cantinacast.com/YouTube. Our wonderful Lauren has some really cool videos out there. So she just published her full review of Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, which Albert is demoing on the screen right now if you're watching. A beautiful cover in the standard edition. Of course, now we're kicking off San Diego Comic-Con, which has got an exclusive cover, which I am insanely jealous about not having.
I've already seen people posting pics, and I just want to find them and mug them and take their book from them.
Well, we don't condone that kind of activity, but I do understand the sentiment, though, because it is a pretty amazing book cover, especially if you were a fan of Master and Apprentice and other ones in that vein.
Yep.
And let me just tell you, I'm still working my way through the audiobook. I'm going to have to just start reading it because I'm just not in the car enough. And it's really good. Like, I don't know what Delilah S. Dawson, the way that she, her writing style has always been great. But, oh my gosh, just her writing style, and Kristen C. is the one that's reading it as well, narrating it. She just does an amazing job. Yeah. And it's just really captivating. It's just a really good story. And Lauren has got almost a 40-minute review.
I saw that, 40 minutes.
Yeah, I know. She was telling me, she's like, I had to cut it short because this is long for what you're supposed to do for the algorithms and all the good stuff like that. But she's like, there's just so many things. She's so excited about it. She knocks it out of the park. She does a great job with it. Mm-hmm. She's already getting a ton of views for it too. So encourage everyone to go out there, go to the YouTube site, cantinacast.com/YouTube. You can find it on the website. You can find it on the YouTube channel. Make sure you give her a like, leave her a good comment. She gets lots of great comments, but always looking for more. I know she's really diligent about responding to them as well. So
yeah,
please go support her. It's a great book. Go buy this book. You're going to want to read this book. It's right before Clone Wars and then all the way through it. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, I just want to inject one thing about the book. I did watch her review, and one thing that stood out was she was talking about how Delilah Dawson has the ability to take these characters that you feel are, I wouldn't call them one-dimensional, but you feel like you've already got them figured out. You've already got them solved. And I felt strongly about that. Even with as little as we got from Phasma, I was thinking when Phasma came out, that was just going to be kind of like, oh, she joined the military and it was going to be, or the Empire,
Right.
Whatever, New Republic. What the hell are they called? The Resistance. No, that's not them. The
First Order.
help me out here. First Order.
First Order.
Right. Sorry. Again,
I was just going to see how long it
chicken
took.
wire and duct tape. But and when you read that book, like it's so expansive. Like she has the ability to just bring a whole lot of different dimensions to a character who may not otherwise stand out. I mean, both of these characters stand out, physically in their appearance and aesthetically, but it's just that depth that she's always brought. And I said that before, even when I saw that she was the writer behind this book, I was like, wow, this could be no offense to any of the other stories about the Inquisitors, but I really felt like this could be an Inquisitor story that's going to be really good to read and be very compelling and interesting and intriguing. And I think that's what she's delivered based on what Lauren's been talking about here on her video.
Yeah, it's a part of the timeline that we've really not explored in these characters of what goes into their journey to become, to become these Inquisitors. Like, what is their life in the Jedi Order like that would push them to this life, and how does Palpatine work and all that? There's so many really cool elements to talk about, and she and I are already talking about doing some extra content for some shows coming up here too, because it's just too good not to talk about. And I think there's a lot of red meat there to dig into. So anyway, go read her spoiler full review. She does have a sneak peek if you want to stay relatively spoiler free. You can go check that out as well. So whenever you get through it, you can come back and read the full one. But please go support her. She did an amazing job, and go buy this book. Again, Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade. We are not getting paid to say that. I don't have any links for you, but we like it. So
Yeah.
highly recommended.
Cool. All right. Let's see. So next up in this folly of a show.
This is usually where we start. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get started and talk about Hera Syndulla. Okay, so I wanted to start with this, and not to be cheesy here, but I guess it is just very interesting because she wears so many proverbial hats in Star Wars, a number of different hats, depending on where you catch her. But I guess some of the things that maybe jump out at you when you think about Hera Syndulla, given her breadth of experience, which we're going to get into tonight, what are some of the aspects or attributes that jump out when Hera Syndulla's name is mentioned or you see her face?
Oh man, like you said, there's so many. I think there's a few that jump out to you. I mean, like motherly figure, I think is one of the first ones that come out, but also really strong leader. I mean, it's really cool how this character and how they've written her and how Vanessa Marshall acted her. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Mary Elizabeth Winstead takes her a step further, of being able to balance that, of being able to say you have a really strong leader, a competent leader, but someone who's willing to make difficult choices and know when to turn tail and leave too sometimes, right? When to give in. But then you also have this really warm, compassionate person, especially with her family, but really anybody that wants to learn and feel like she can bring them and take them under her wing and see the best in them and even bring out the best in them too. And I think this is why like she and Kanan were such an amazing pair as well, because their strengths and their weaknesses really complemented one another. But her individually in this role, even after Kanan, was just still so prevalent and just so important to these characters that she's the one that really grounds the Spectre team, as well as really, and I think in some ways, in some of the other material, really ground the rebellion and what comes after the rebellion, right? And in these other, like in Alphabet Squadron and stuff like that. So I think it's really cool how you get a character that can really balance those two things, and it doesn't feel forced. It's just so natural. And even on a bad day, she can kind of pull out of one and move right into the other when she needs to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, I agree. Like all the same things come to mind. When the series was first started and they were talking about the names of the characters, I remember Dave Filoni talking about how many of the character names have biblical or historical references to other, mythologies and that sort of thing. And Hera being, I guess, the goddess of protection or something, whatever her title is. I mean, it's fitting for that character in a lot of ways, and some examples that we'll talk about tonight. But I would agree. Like, there's so many similarities between her and Leia, right? Just being kind, compassionate, nurturing, warm, but at the same time, she's like a no nonsense go-getter. I mean, a prolific leader at any given moment, right? She's just somebody that you want to fight for, and we see examples of that in Star Wars Rebels. We see where she's able to take, what comes to mind is Rebel Assault. So this is season 4, which I want to talk about a lot if we can tonight. But Rebel Assault in season 4 of Star Wars Rebels where she takes on she's got 24 fighters with her, 24 ships. And when you look at the cast, right, Mart is in there, and they've got a couple other throwaway characters. A lot of them die. Almost all of them do die. But there's 24 fighters going up against, I think, 4 Star Destroyers. There's 2 light freighters and a whole plethora of TIE fighters coming at them. And they hold their own. I mean, they're able to take out one of the Star Destroyers, get past the barricade. But that's a really good example of not only getting to see her flying prowess, which I would also throw masterful pilot in there. I'll come back to here in a minute.
Definitely one of the best pilots, yeah.
Yeah, so you got that, but then you also see the leadership qualities, and it's in that episode you can see where she's able to take these, pilots that are don't get me wrong, they're fine, they're good pilots, but she's able to elevate their experience because they want to fight for her, the tactics that she deploys or employs, all of that stuff, and there's many other examples of this, but just the strong leadership aspect of it. Going back to the pilot, right? When you talk about who are the best pilots in Star Wars, I think we had a discussion around this, maybe around the time that Rise of Skywalker came out. I think Han Solo's always in there. You can make an argument for Lando, though we've never really seen it. It's just it could be a lie, which probably goes in. It's probably on par for Lando of all people.
Right.
But you got Ben Solo, Kylo Ren in there, right? You've got Poe Dameron, but you cannot leave Hera Syndulla out. And it's unfortunate because unless you've watched Rebels, you really don't have the context. You don't get to see. And there are some very good examples. I think we called one out when we did the season 2 from a certain point of view breakdown. And we talked about where she was able to fly between 2 of the Star Destroyers who had the tractor beams on, and they caught, Vader in that, and while she kind of got away. So, that's no small feat to outrun Vader, aka Anakin Skywalker, in a dogfight and lure him into something like that, force sensitive and all. So I think those for me are kind of it. But I guess the last thing is maybe the one thing that is probably the most prevalent. And I was getting so choked up watching the season. I just watched season 4 because we have a show coming up on Sunday where we're going to talk about
I haven't got all the way through it yet.
Top 3 episodes, and I'd already seen it, and I was crying like a baby when I watched it then, and I was like, okay, I'm going to watch it for this. I'm going to watch a couple episodes that we'll talk about here later for this show, and I was freaking crying all over again because there's just something about that relationship between Kanan and Hera, and then Hera as the maternal figure of the Ghost Crew. And I think they did a really good job of giving us so many great examples where she steps in and she's very nurturing and is that motherly figure. But the one thing that got me, the one thing that always gets me, and it may make my top 3, I'll just spoil that right now, is when Chopper comes up after Kanan passes, and Chopper and she's out there kind of staring at the sunset, trying to be alone, needs time for herself. And Chopper walks up there, and his little hand comes out and just reaches up and grabs her hand, and nothing's said. And he just holds her hand there.
You're going to make me cry just thinking about it, man.
I know. It's just so beautiful. But, it's just, I mean, she's such a beloved character. So I'm really excited to see, what they're going to do with her and Ahsoka series, what her role is. We're going to speculate on that here in just a little bit, but very, very intrigued to find out how her character is going to be portrayed now that she's a general. And a lot of her life before Rebels has either gone on hold or is gone completely altogether, with so many things that have changed since then.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, so I'm excited to kind of walk through some of the eras of Hera, if you will.
Yeah.
That would have been a great title, too.
Yeah, well, too late now. I mean, I guess you could go do the title card again if you wanted.
No, I'm all right.
Yeah, so so let's talk about just quickly kind of a rundown on, I guess, who she is, right? And for anybody that's not aware who Hera is and where she's come from, I think her official birth year, it's always funny how they figure this out on Wikipedia. It's like, well, this happened in this day, so you subtract this. I mean, there's this long equation, but at the end of the day, I think by best guesstimates, she was born in 29 BBY, so before the battle.
Sounds pretty reasonable. Yeah, because when we see her in Bad Batch, she's probably 9 years old or so. Yeah. 8 or 9 years old. Yeah, so that makes sense.
And for as a kind of a pinpoint or reference point, Order 66 happens in 32 BBY. So she's born just approximately 3 years after the battle of, 3 years after Order 66. So she's been born into this galactic period of war where the former separatists are now fighting, against the Empire, the rule of the Empire. Cham Syndulla, we see him a lot we saw him in Clone Wars. We saw him in Star Wars Rebels. Him and his wife. What was his sister? Her mother's name? Is it Indiri?
Eleni, I think.
Eleni, that's it. Eleni Syndulla. Yeah, so Cham and Eleni Syndulla. And Cham's kind of like the leader of the Twi'leks on Ryloth, which is a pretty prominent planet that plays a prominent role, I guess, during the Clone Wars, and then just right after with the Galactic Empire as well. The one thing that I had totally completely forgot, and it was when I watched the rewatch of season 4 Rebels, that she had a brother. They don't really do a lot with this. They don't talk about it. They don't spend a lot of time on it. Right. It's something that Thrawn picks up when he's looking at her Calicori and mentions that, it looks like you had a brother here. And it sounds like she did have a brother at a very young age who passed away in some regard. So, it's worth noting just because we're talking about her family and kind of where she came from. But it's little things like that I've really enjoyed about Star Wars Rebels, and just how they continue to kind of flesh out and deepen the character backstories, and makes you wonder and think, like, how much did that impact her? How old was she? What happened, right? There's probably a lot to be said there as well.
Her first taste of flying and stuff, I think, in the Bad Batch. I mean, it made some of those episodes really cool, especially the partnership with Omega.
Yeah.
But I really like getting a little bit more about her parents, too. We knew some about Cham Syndulla because we've seen him in other content, but we really didn't know anything about her mother. We didn't know a lot of the history there, and being able to see them, in that stage, and where she gets both sides of her, but just why she's so well-rounded is just really cool to be able to have that on screen with Eleni as well as Cham, and seeing Cham at a different stage of his life too, knowing that, not only revolutionaries, but she's also kind of been brought up in war of sorts, right? So she's always been more or less groomed in order to be this warrior, even though they didn't necessarily want that for her. It's just a product of Ryloth's situation, the Clone Wars, Order 66, the Galactic, the Galactic Civil War, and then everything else that came after that too. So it was just, you almost feel bad a little bit for Hera that she's just had a constant state of war. This is what some of the comments that she makes in the Ahsoka trailer, now in the Mando kind of timeline, so compelling to really pick apart and look into, because they echo very much like Leia's, where they've just been raised in this era of war, and you can't really get out of it. But again, she's seen what it can do, but she also has a reference with Cham of how you can pull yourself out of that as well. And so I think it makes her an interesting character about reconciling with other people as well, finding ways to bridge differences. And you talked about some of her leadership qualities before, going into challenging situations that you shouldn't win, and you might still take heavy losses, but you still win kind of in the right way, and so I think some of that is just her ability to bring people together, and that stems from her relationships with her family, which were very, very difficult and very tested for a long time, but they were able to find a way forward and make that work out.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good segue, because it also speaks to how she got into the war. Of course, like you mentioned, her parents were freedom fighters, for lack of a better term. Eventually became a rebel sect. They became the Ryloth sect. I think it was the Ryloth Freedom Force or something. They had an official term for their kind of sect of the rebels, the budding rebellion there. But it was because she had been surrounded by war and ships kind of flying in. And we got some of this, I think it was in the Bad Batch episode, which, in retrospect, I feel like we really needed that episode. It's unfortunate we never got it in Star Wars Rebels, and maybe it was planned at some point. But then for Filoni to kind of weave in the Bad Batch and kind of give us that background, I thought was brilliant. So, but in that episode, we kind of we learn that she's always been compelled to get out and fly, and that's always been her thing. There's that one moment, I think it's in the Bad Batch also, where she's they show her hand. And she's kind of doing this on the clouds, right? And dreaming, aspiring to one day be a fighter or pilot, and not knowing that she would become one of the greatest pilots ever, which is really great.
Very reminiscent of what she is in Rebels when she's talking, when she's trying to earn the right to fly the Blade Wing, or what would come the B Wing.
Yep.
And she's just kind of talking about it in the skies. It's very reminiscent of that, just a more mature version of the same, of the same idealism of it all, and the same romanticizing of flying and just being free.
Which Yoda would not approve of, because he's very down on, always looking into the stars, never your mind on what you're doing, that kind of thing.
Some people call it aspiration, but whatever.
Sure, goals.
All right.
The other thing was, we come into Rebels and she already has Chopper and she already has the Ghost. And we really don't have great backstories. I mean, we get a little bit on Chopper because there's that moment when I think they go back to Ryloth, and I think that's the episode. Isn't it Return to Ryloth or something like that?
Yeah.
Where they go back and Chopper has that kind of quiet moment to himself where he sees the downed
They memorialized the Y-Wing in the plaza, which was kind of interesting, but
yeah. And the backstory is that Chopper and that pilot crashed in a Y-Wing during the Clone Wars, and she found Chopper, and Chopper just became her droid. And so at a very, very young age, and that's really all we have. We don't really have much background on that. She's just kind of she found it. So I guess on Ryloth, it's like a deer. If you kill it, you get to keep it kind of thing. And then for the ghost,
I don't think that's how that works, but
it's like that in Texas, I think. Okay. For the ghost, the ghost is just mysteriously shows up, I think, in A New Dawn, if my memory serves or timeline's correct, right? She's already got it in there, and we never get the backstory on it, which, I'm depending on the day, like I want to know everything about Star Wars, and then there's some things that I feel like are sacred and I don't need to know. This is one that has, over time, I really kind of want to know what the background is, just because that ship has so much character, and
it's like the
continues.
Falcon. I mean, it's very much like the Falcon. There's a story behind it. It would be really cool to be able to see that somehow.
And I'm going to say this now because I don't know that we're going to really get into Forces of Destiny, because
how she makes Han admit that the Ghost is a better ship than the Falcon.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was going to say. There's a kind of a cute moment there where, and again, this is Forces of Destiny is a cartoon aimed at 6-year-olds or very young kids, right, under the age of 10, I would say. But there's a little story in there where I think they needed, what was it, like energy bars to give the Ewoks or something.
Right.
And so, who better else to go get energy bars than General Solo? Send him up, to speak to General Syndulla to get the energy bars. So anyways, they have a little back and forth, and she's like kind of ribbing him and teasing him about, which is the better ship. And she basically holds him for ransom and says, I'm not giving you the energy bars until you admit that the Ghost is a better ship. And he's like, all right, fine, whatever. So there's that little cute story that they did as well. But more on that maybe a little bit later when we talk about all the other appearances that she's made. But yeah, going back to the Ghost, incredible ship. I wish we did know more about it. I don't think we'll get more in the Ahsoka series. And I got questions about whether we'll see the Ghost in the Ahsoka series, which we'll touch on here in a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. You could see where it would not show up. But we'll get to our final hype show here in a few weeks, or in a few weeks. So we'll get there with that one. So we'll save that for later.
Let's talk about Kanan. So I'm going to try to keep it together here, folks. So with Kanan, there's, in A New Dawn, let's see, without getting into the whole story of A New Dawn, but essentially she rescues him from, was it Ray Sloan and the Imperials or whatever it was. And they end up kind of, at the very end of the book, they finally just kind of run off together, and they're kind of a thing. And they've had their moments where they're kind of, you can tell there's something there. When we get to Rebels in season 1, there's a lot of love, literally referring to each other as love, and you can tell they're affectionate. There is some physical contact, very mild again, because it's a kid's show. But you can tell it's like they feel like a father kind of parents that are in love, and
it's definitely a partnership.
Yeah, a partnership of sorts. But then the criticism that we saw over the years was that her and Kanan both kind of stopped doing that. Like, you don't see it as much in season 2 and season 3, which I would attest to. Like, it does. There is a drastic, sharp decline in just how much is happening. By the time we get to season 4, it's fully ramped up again. And there's, like, narratively, there's reasons why, because it hits that, we want these later episodes to hit harder, and they do. So there's kind of a noticeable difference when we get to season 4. But I guess, is that fair to really criticize the writers, or maybe even just the characters, and remove the writers from it? Does it make sense in your head for these characters to kind of take a back seat from that, given everything that was going on in season 2 and season 3? Because there were some drastic changes that happened during that time.
Well, and I thought they actually explained pretty well why they were drifting apart. I think the characters even acknowledged that they were not together as much, and that they might have said, I think they probably admitted they missed each other, but they knew that they were drifting, especially when Kanan felt like he needed to go away, right, and lead them away. This is with the Inquisitors, with Ezra and stuff like that at the end of season 2. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there was a lot of that going on, but also this was the rebellion. Like, so Hera was, she was all in, and Kanan was not sold on it. Right?
Yeah.
He's sold on helping people and doing the little jobs, but he's not necessarily ready for he's not ready for the big show. He's already fought in one war. He's not ready to go and sign up for another one, especially one that feels like it's a losing cause. Not that he's against the little guy, but I mean, why would you do that when you were doing just fine on your own? He wants to protect his family.
Yeah.
But I think she's the one that she feels a responsibility to set up this rebellion. She's seen her own, planet of Ryloth. He's aware of this too, but she feels invested in it. She wants the rest of the team to go along with her too, but also the family is kind of, I won't say falling apart, but they're going in their own directions, right? The kids are growing up. Kanan or not Kanan, but Ezra and Sabine have their own paths, right? They're maturing. They're figuring out their home lives. They're figuring out who they are as people. They're going through things that Hera can't really equate to on the Ezra side either, right?
Right.
And Kanan and Ezra have their own little world, in addition to all of that. So I think it all fit really well. And I thought they actually did a great job of explaining why they were drifting, but they also did a good job of coming back together in certain times, right? And having moments like on, what's the planet called? Atolo or something like that. The one where the Bendu's at. I mean, and they have a really beautiful moment where they embrace and there's like a sunset behind them and everything else, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of that there that they acknowledge it. They call it for what it is. And so I think any criticism of that is actually probably a bit unwarranted because this is what happens with real people when they're working, right? You're consumed, you have projects at work, you both work, you have kids, you have responsibilities, you have sports, you have whatever's going on, right? You don't make a lot of couple time, whatever it is, and a date night and things like that. You have to go and make an effort to do it. But sometimes it's really hard to make that effort to do it because there are so many conflicting priorities.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was just emulated real life in a very Star Wars kind of way. And so I really had no issues with any of that. I thought it felt actually more realistic because of it. And you feel the strain on the relationship, I think is the important part. If you don't feel that strain, then the criticism becomes more valid of saying that it didn't feel important to the characters. Yeah. And I think it was clearly important to the characters, but they've got enough to keep them busy. You don't always see it every minute of the day.
Yeah, I think you're right. It feels I think they didn't come out and punch you in the face with it. You kind of had to watch the season and see the subtle things that were happening in the background. I mean, one of the more significant things, and I'm not sure if you called this out or not, but in season 2, I think is when she's promoted to captain. She becomes Captain Syndulla. So already she's taken on an additional level of responsibility.
And you feel that weight on her too, especially as they bring in new recruits and they're building new squadrons. They lose your squadron. Sorry to interrupt. I mean, there's just there's a lot that goes with it.
Yeah. And this is the same thing that we see again, to go back to kind of the Leia and Han Solo kind of relationship. We know that after all this was done, after the Empire had fallen, they started to drift apart because they just got. I mean, it's while these guys were trying to keep a relationship together in the midst of also building a rebellion, Han and Leia were trying to keep a relationship together in the midst of building the New Order, right? The New Republic. So you can see where that happens. By the time we get to season 4, she's a general. On top of all that, you had Kanan, who was juggling, not only training Ezra, trying to make him a better Jedi, but also make him a better man. I think that's overlooked a lot, or better person. Let's just say that.
Right.
That's overlooked quite a bit. And you've got Sabine now, because he spent a good portion of season 3 in consultation with Hera on how best to bring up Sabine and how to raise her, how to train her, how to make her, a better leader, because they were trying to fit her into this position of power over back on Mandalore. So yeah, you're right. There was just so many things that were going on that something had to give. And I think they did a good job at least making us feel like there was at least a touch point. You never felt like they had drifted apart and they were just broken, right? They were always there for each other, certainly had each other's back. It was more of at times a very working relationship, but it was good to see that they got that kind of back in season 3. The one thing that really stood out to me in season 4, though, it was during the Doom episode. So this is right after Kanan dies, and she's already had her moment of she's kind of going through her grieving moments, and she's taking full responsibility. Like, she blames herself for Kanan's death. Going back to what you said earlier, where Kanan didn't really want to get into this bigger, epic kind of space opera fight that was going on. He wanted to keep it small, be freedom fighters, work for the people and not for the whole galaxy. Like, he just felt like there's no way we can save the whole galaxy. We're not the Jedi Order. But she starts blaming herself in that episode, saying it was my fault. He was right. I should have never done this. But really, the message that I thought was really important here And similar to, again, going back to Han and Leia and other relationships was, she kept saying, I wish I had more time. I never knew I had more time. And they played with this idea of them actually saying, I love you throughout the series.
Right.
And Kanan, this is where I was getting choked up, because Kanan, you could see he was trying to say it right before, because he knew he was going to die. He had already seen the vision. He knew where his fate was. He was trying to have these last moments and have a conversation with Hera, but she was drugged up and gibbering, spouting gibberish and nonsense, which I thought was really funny because he was so sweet and so caring for her.
So Indiana Jones and Marion Ravenwood can never catch a break. Indiana Jones,
right? It's exactly right. Yeah. But yeah, that's another part that just kind of rips you when you realize that, there were so many and she says as much, there were so many things that I wanted to say, so many things that I did. I thought we were going to have more time, and she never took advantage of it. And so she's left now with never having said that to him, never saying I love you, never having, they were just kind of getting going again, but they never were back where they were, season 1 or A New Dawn, which is really unfortunate.
Right.
So, all right, well, get your tissues out and let's move on to okay, so here's what I was saying earlier. Like, she's a character that has been in a number of things. So I'm going to rattle off some stuff here, but I want you to kind of just fill in on anything or, wax on any of the stuff that you feel like is worth mentioning or talking about that we haven't done so already. So outside of Rebels, we had her in the Bad Batch, like we mentioned. There's the New Dawn novel. She was in Alphabet Squadron, where she took on a whole squadron of pilots, and she was kind of their leader, trainer, bringing these new recruits into the New Order or New Republic. She was in the Forces of Destiny. Lighthearted moments, again, nothing major, but she was in that. She was in the Dr. Aphra series of comics, where she was captured, and she had a big bow on her head at one point. That was nice. She was in the Kanan comics. She appeared in the main title of Star Wars comics, where she was on Hoth, just days before the invasion of Hoth, before they found it. They were trying to fix the shield generators that we saw that were blown up. So
because when you need power and shields, who do you call?
Yeah. Hera Syndulla.
You call Phoenix Squadron.
Squadron. That's what they're good at. She was in the Star Wars Adventures comics. She was in Star Wars Squadrons, which I guess I saw the screenshot. I only knew that because I knew that Vanessa Marshall had done the voice. Right. And I think she may even did some of the motion capture for that one as well. I went back and watched some of the footage for like the cutscenes for her. And I don't know that I didn't really get a good sense of just how important or pivotal her role was, but it did sound like she was just one of those advisors who were saying, okay, here's your next mission. You did a great job. We're going to need you to do this. So she was kind of driving some of the story, although she wasn't a main character. And that's probably it. There might be some things that I've left out, but there is a lot here. And I guess what I'm saying is she is a character that has been in so much Star Wars, but going back to my horrible joke at the very beginning, for most people, she is just the reference that's made over the PA system when they say General Syndulla, you're wanted in the waiting lobby, or whatever they say over there on Yavin temples. Do they have a waiting lobby in Yavin temples? I don't know. But anything that you want to add, any other kind of stories that came from those that you want to talk about before we move on to the next piece here?
Well, I think the one that also supports something we talked about earlier in the show, it was an Alphabet Squadron, is when she takes this ragtag group, she has to find a way to actually get them to meld and work together. And when you just talk about what is important about Hera, about finding ways to, take really rough around the edges and make people not only work and mold them, but also be able to work together, right? And I think you see this with the Ghost crew in general, of making this really weird group, the way that she makes Ezra and Zeb go do a Melu run, right? And go get supplies and make them work out their differences. And it sets them on a totally different trajectory, right? And you could call that kind of mothering them a little bit, but also I think some of that's just very much leader-oriented, of what you identify situations, you put people in the right situations in order for them to grow and for them to come together. And especially when you need it in these really high-tension, stress environments like a fighter combat or any kind of fighting scenario, you need these people to be able to trust one another. You need to be able to trust them as well. So putting them in position to be able to do it. And I don't remember the squadron or anything like that. I didn't read these books very thoroughly. I'll just admit that. But I do remember some of those elements, though, that I really enjoyed about that with Hera specifically. And I think you just see a lot of that throughout, but in Alphabet Squadron is a really good example of it.
Yeah. So there are a couple of other appearances, and I'm using air quotes here, although these I think have all been confirmed at this point, at least as cameos. So we had her in the Battle of Endor. Now, that's not a cameo. We got confirmation of that in the epilogue of season 4, right?
Right.
Sabine's doing the voiceover talking about Hera and Rex fought at the Battle of Endor. We can back that up now with the Tales of Forces of Destiny episodes that we got. So that one's not a big surprise. I would imagine during that battle she was likely in space. As part of that big space battle that was going on. So the other one was the Battle of Scarif. So in Rogue One, there is that one shot for all of about 1 second where you can see they're coming in, and all the fighters and that kind of, ragtag group of ships. It's a very eclectic collection of ships that show up at Scarif. But the Ghost,
and she's over the PA. Yep.
Yep, the Ghost. That's right, and so the Ghost is there. You can see that. So she had a part in that battle. Two very important battles, mind you. Let's not take anything away from those two, right? And then lastly, arguably one of the more epic, bigger battles, maybe even bigger than these two, is the Rise of Skywalker. And I don't remember them ever showing it when Lando says, where there's more of us, and suddenly we get all these ships, and it looks like everybody and their mothers when their Winnebago's there. I don't think we ever see the Ghost there, but at the very, very end, when they're coming back and landing, there's one shot where they pull away, and you clearly see the Ghost slowly descending and landing. So she took a part in that battle. And you'd like to think that at this point, this kind of a character would have had a massive role in any one of these movies, right? Oh, yeah. It makes sense for her to, but of course they didn't, because the writers, weren't working that. Those weren't the characters they were going to work with. But I don't know, anything you want to add to that? I just thought it was worth mentioning that she's been a part of some pretty pivotal moments in the timeline of Star Wars history as we know it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is I think now we're entering a new era of Star Wars where we can get characters from the animated series, and we can get characters from the comic books and from the books, and they actually have a real shot at coming into live action television and movies and what have you. They're not going to fit into every story. I think that's the part we have to kind of keep in mind, is that they won't fit into every story. So it's really cool we get those cameos and Easter eggs, because at least we know they're still there. We know there's stories to be told. We know there's gaps to fill. That gets us excited that there is still something there, and we have tangible evidence of it. But I like that now we're in this era. This is where I think the Disney Plus series really do give us a new opportunity of exploring characters that might not have been, they've been relegated to, young people TV and cartoons and however you want to view it, that didn't necessarily get the massive viewership that a theatrical release might. So I really enjoy that we're getting more specific content for these characters, and people will be introduced to them. Now, it's a very different character inherently than what we are used to, and so your mileage may vary on some of this, of course, but I think it's just really cool that we're in this era. We actually have this opportunity to be able to do it and be able to eventually get to some of those stories, even if they're little tidbits here and there, cameos of cameos, effectively.
Yeah. What about, so if I were going to recommend somebody, again, she's in so many things, and I certainly wouldn't prescribe go watch everything she's ever been in, read everything she's been in. That's just probably not realistic and wouldn't do you well. I think simply watching Rebels is a pretty monumental task in and of itself. But because she's it's a lot of episodes, but because she is a main character, it's hard not to say, you should watch all the episodes, because I think every one of them gives you a new component of her personality, a new angle to her personality in some way. But the ones that I have here, I've got Wings of the Master, Season 2, Episode 7. We talked about this one, again, when we did the From a Certain Point of View, Season 2 Top 3 Moments. I think, I don't even remember where I landed, but I know it was in my honorable mentions at least.
Yeah.
But just, you really get the sense of the thrill and excitement and joy that she gets from flying. And it's really nice to have kind of this backstory that, she was instrumental in getting the B-1s off the ground, no pun intended, getting them into the Rebel fleet, because, presumably they helped change the tide of the battle there at the very end.
And I would even recommend pairing that with the episode that she's in for Bad Batch as well. That way you can see that journey end to end. I think those two episodes really do go well together. Yeah,
no, it's a good point. It's almost like, here's part one, here's the precursor, here's part two. They do hold each other's hands there.
Yeah, here's her young and naive way of it, and then here's her realizing her dream and that retrospective view of it. It's kind of nice to link those together.
We also had Homecoming in Season 2, Episode 16. So this is her coming back to her family. you know, it's a very, we didn't mention it, but
it's an important story for her. Yeah.
Yeah, because we didn't mention this, and we don't need to get into all the details, but she did have kind of a contentious relationship with her father. He's a very stout kind of. He's a very different person. He's not a bad person. He's doing the right thing, but they didn't always see eye to eye on some things, and they do eventually come around. I love the fact that they also went back. We probably didn't mention this. So in Rebels, she has no accent, right? She speaks like with an American accent, and nobody made a big deal about it. But then when they introduced us to the Twi'leks, they'd always forever even in Clone Wars, they all had a French accent. And that became kind of like the accent for Twi'leks. So if you're a if you're a Twi'lek and you're from Ryloth or any of the other planets that they're from, you just kind of had these accents. And then when she came back in Homecoming, there's a moment there where she gets into kind of a squabble with her father, and they're kind of going back and forth, and she's really getting in her face and he's getting in her face. And she suddenly falls into this French accent. And I remember when that episode came out, a lot of folks were completely like floored, like, what the heck? Where is this coming from? And I don't remember who it was. I want to say it was Dave Filoni, or it might have been Vanessa Marshall herself. But the way this was explained, they actually used a Texas reference. They said, if you're from Texas or from the South and you've been living, I don't know, up north, anywhere out but home, and then you come back and you're surrounded by all the people that you grew up with, your family.
It just comes out.
It just comes out. And the funny thing was, Vanessa Marshall, I think she's technically fluent in French. And so
yeah, she's fluent in French. Yeah.
Right. So when they asked her, can you do a French accent? She was like, oh yeah, I can do a French accent. So they never did it, of course, until she came back to Ryloth. But I do like that because there is some reality. It is based in reality. When I go back to home, the way I speak to my family sounds very different because that's just, how we spoke growing up. So anyways, that's a little backstory there. Getting back to the episodes, Hera's Heroes is another good one. That's season 3, episode 5. Rebel Assault. Well, this is all 3 episodes. So Rebel Assault, Jedi Knight, and Doom, in that order. Those 3 from season 4. And this starts with the battle that I mentioned earlier, and ending with how she moves on with her life after losing Kanan. Last thing I'll say, and I'll kind of turn it over to you to kind of we'll talk about the last one too here. Her resolve in that episode is something that really stands out. Like she feels like she took the time that she had with Kanan for granted, but from that point on, never again. Like she seems like a totally different person, so much more focused. And you see that when Ezra leaves, as dangerous and as precarious as that situation was for him, she's not as impacted. Like she feels like she's trusting of Ezra in a lot of ways. And she just feels like a different person. She came out a different person at the end of that one. You see that very clearly, I think, in Doom. And then, of course, Family Reunion and Farewell, which are the last 2 episodes, which brings everybody back from the whole freaking series into Rebels. So you kind of have to include that one. So I know I've been talking a lot here, but is there anything else you want to kind of add, or anything that stands out for any of these episodes, or any episodes that I might have missed? There's a lot of them, like I said, but these are some of the ones that I think that really kind of stand out.
Yeah, like you pointed out, there's a lot of small moments throughout the entire series that are worth watching the whole series when you have the time and just chip away at it. I really like her in season 3. So when they get raffle stomped over Lothal, Thrawn just completely decimates the fleet. It's the first time that she's really, not the first time, but the really first time it's really set in so heavily that they have really lost and they have been beaten into the ground. And it feels like she's kind of taking that first responsibility. This is the first time we really got to see that gravity, that weight come on her. She's lost a lot of team, when they were forming Phoenix Squadron, they were kind of expanding it and they kept losing them. You could feel it then too, but that was the first time. And I really like the emotion that they put into the character, that you do have that, but that sets her up for these later on when she knows she has to have, I love the way you put it with the resolve of being able to say that you have to set some of that aside in order to keep pushing forward. You grieve while you can, grieve in the way you can, but you still need to pick up and move forward and do it in memory of these people that we've lost along the way. And don't let those sacrifices be in vain, and try to continue moving not only our story, but moving, what we feel is right and just in the galaxy, and move that forward so that we can actually, we can overthrow this tyranny that we've lost so many. We have to keep pushing forward. So I love that she never has that give up in her, even though you could just tell there's sometimes she's like, I just don't know what to do.
Right.
But then people look to her and she has something about her that just has her. I think this is her dad in her too, right? I mean, when when you're a freedom fighter or revolutionary, you can never quit because you just have so much vested in it, and it's just become kind of who you are. And so this is why it's so interesting to talk about the Ahsoka series as well.
Yep. No, good points. I like that reference to there. You definitely see a lot of Cham in her, as much as she probably doesn't want to hear that. Right. I think a lot of us are the same way. You know, we have a lot of our parents in us, and even though we don't want to look
Some
in the mirror
things
and face
you
that.
probably like better than others.
Yeah, right. The
There's
good and the
redeeming
bad.
qualities everywhere, right?
Good and the bad. Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at on the time that we got left. Let's move forward, or look forward into the Ahsoka series, and we'll probably revisit this because we are going to have a final hype show, which we usually do just before the premiere of any series or movie, where we kind of give you all the bloody details and really try to get you hyped up more than you maybe already are or aren't. But I want to just kind of talk about Mary Elizabeth Winstead. You know, she's been tapped on the shoulder to play her. There was a lot of rumors flying around whether or not she was going to be playing Hera. There were, I think when she was announced or rumored to have been in the show, we were kind of pitting her in all kinds of different roles. I could see her going into this role. I don't know that I've gotten a lot from the trailers just yet to kind of have a strong opinion one way or the other about how well she's going to do. I'll use the reference of Ahsoka, right? When Rosario Dawson came in, there were some things that were different. I'm still trying to work through those personally in my own head. But so far from what you've seen, how do you feel Mary Elizabeth Winstead is doing with the character? Do you like what you've heard, what you've seen aesthetically as well? Like there's some stark differences. Her lips are much redder, right? And I know we're getting into the details here, but she looks like she's wearing Saturday night girls' night out kind of lipstick on, which is maybe that's
that far, but
that's what she's doing now. I don't know. Okay. The other part is they changed her eye color. You know, in the series she had green eyes, and she's got these really bright blue eyes now, which is contrast with that bright red lipstick and the green. What I'm saying is I've seen people go, wow, this looks really different. And it's beyond just we had to make it more, we had to translate to live. And so some of these things just had to happen. I don't agree that these had to happen. So I'm curious as to where that creative decision came from. But I guess your thoughts on how this character is starting to look, no pun intended.
Well, I think aesthetically, I think you go look at some of the other content that's not Rebels, and you look at Hera. Look at her in the comic books, look at her in Squadrons, look at her in some of the video games, and you look at the way that they've designed that character. It's actually much closer to Mary Elizabeth Winstead's facial features and structure than it is animated Rebels. Right? And we talked about this before. The way that the characters are drawn sometimes is exceptionally difficult to get on screen. Mm-hmm. Hera is so slight, but still and so powerful still. It's like, how do you get this right mix? And so we haven't really seen enough from Mary Elizabeth Winstead to be able to know what to expect from her. She definitely seems to have the presence, though. I think of the things that we have seen the presence, we've seen the boldness. She's very confident. I think she's exuding that confidence. And so I think she's nailing that part of it. The voice is going to be a little bit different because Vanessa Marshall is just so iconic with the character, even in content outside of Rebels, right? So that'll be a little bit more challenging to get through, and there'll be a little bit more nitpicking in that space. But again, what she has to get right is to make sure that she gets that boldness right, and she gets that balance that we've talked about all night tonight of saying, really bold, strong, smart, competent leader, but also warm, nurturing, can look at things from a different angle and appeal to what matters to people, not necessarily just what matters to a military, strike force, or from her general type of, or capital G, general duties, mm-hmm. Within this fledgling rebellion, or not rebellion, but new republic, or potentially even resistance. I think that's the part I'm actually most excited about, are the parallels we see with Leia and Leia's disagreement with the New Republic of saying, hey, there's this threat going. Why won't you help me stem and ward off this threat? And we're getting a lot of the same exact dialogue, or very similar dialogue from Hera in the trailer, where she's saying, we've got this threat. I've lived through wars before, multiple of them. Yeah. Why won't you help me avoid another one? Why are you being so why the pacifist attitude now? You and I know all of the reasons why, because we've read them in the books, we've seen them in Mandalorian, we've seen them in everywhere else, right? So, but again, it's interesting to see that parallel and be able to kind of pull that back to like Bloodline and things like that too.
Yeah, yeah. I you bring up a good point. Like it's one of the questions I don't have it in the notes, but just kind of, what is her role in Ahsoka? It's not clear to me 100%. Like I can come up with some.
What do military generals do in this era of peace when they're dismantling the fleet?
Right, exactly.
I mean, it's a valid question. Like, what is their role in this place?
Yeah. And it could be she's not doing a whole lot of anything right now outside of, getting rumors or picking up pieces of the trail that there's something bigger going on. And it may take somebody like Ahsoka to come in and say, I'm going to need your help and, kind of rekindle the spirit, if you will, get her going, doing something other than just pushing paperwork or fighting with, the senators or whoever else is running the New Republic at this point. And by the way, for context, I think when we get to Ahsoka, we're in somewhere in the 10. It's so squirrely in terms of the timeline with this one because it's hard to tell how much time has passed between Mando seasons and that kind of thing. But I think by all accounts, we're somewhere in the ballpark of about 10 to 12 years past after the Battle of Yavin.
Right.
So somewhere where season 3 of Mandalorian sits. So I think at this point, some of the questions I have, again, going back to what is it she's doing, what is she fighting for, and then what is it that Ahsoka, pitches to Hera in order to get her on board. And I think the more obvious, although I think it's still a little bit nebulous because they haven't given us all the details, which I think we're going to get. I don't think we're going to go into the show not knowing some of these questions or answers, but it does feel like, she's tempting Hera with the idea that I have details, more information about what you're smelling, what you're seeing in the works, right? This heir to the empire, this thing that's brewing. And it may not even be, these could be completely unrelated to, I'm starting to get into the final hype show and some other stuff here, but, there could be two separate initiatives here. There could be the return of Thrawn, and there could be the rebuilding of the Emperor Palpatine. It's safe to assume they're the one and the same, given how devoted Thrawn was to Palpatine, but I don't know that for sure. So they could be two separate threads here, and maybe that's interesting enough for her to kind of be like, oh, okay, it's really this one, and it turns out to be a totally different one. I guess what I'm saying is, it's not clear where that's going to go, but my presumption is that she is going to use that as a mechanism to pull Hera into it, and she is traveling with Hera, not to bring it back to the Ghost, but we saw them two together so far. It looks like Ahsoka and Hera are at one of the planets, at least in a couple of episodes. I don't know if they're going to, if this is going to be kind of this grand reunion tour where they're bringing everybody in and they're just kind of flying around the galaxy in Ahsoka's counselor ship. But it begs the question of like, well, where the heck is the Ghost? Why wouldn't they show it at this point? What's the big secret? Or maybe they're just saving it for a week out to show it. But
we're getting a Ghost Lego set, so there's still hope for it. And
I'm getting the Ghost Lego set because I pre-ordered that sucker. It's on the way.
Well. I hear you. But I think that's why the bloodline comparison is so valid, because you can see that Ahsoka could just say, look, I keep hearing Thrawn is coming back and I'm not crazy. And Hera knows what that means. She knows what that would mean. Mon Mothma knows too. And I think this is where that dissonance is so important. And I think it's going to be so interesting. And why some of the comments that Genevieve O'Reilly made in the article we talked about a week or so ago, I want to know what the dynamics are between Hera and Mon Mothma here, because Hera can talk to Mon. She goes, Mon, you know what he's capable of doing. But I could see her response coming back with and saying, yes, but Ezra sacrificed himself to take care of that threat. Let's move on. And when you look at the broader Senate and things like that, the way they treated Leia was like, you're a hero from a bygone. We thank you for everything you've done, Vader's daughter. But thank you, but you're a hero from an era. Let go of your warmongering. Let go of your wars. You don't have to live that way anymore, but you can't stop. And I could see where Hera might start to get labeled a certain way, and other military leaders that feel like, even though they feel like there's a threat, we're at peace. We need to be at peace. Yeah. We need to continue peace. And that's the issue with the New Republic in general, is that they've got this false sense of security because they don't know what's on the other side of the curtain, and they don't sense what's coming, and the signs that they have are so fragmented because intentionally by the Empire and the Shadow Council and everybody else, to where that that's obscured from them. And so all they can do is be consumed by, we've got this insurmountable task of bringing the galaxy together, and it's not going so hot. It's really struggling. But I love those parallels. I think that's why it's so important. I think that's why, like Mary Elizabeth Winstead acting in particular, interacting with Genevieve O'Reilly, I'm really interested to see what gets pulled from Rebels into this relationship, and then to kind of do a comparison and look back of when Mon Mothma becomes a rebel, and then some of the stuff with Saw, and then how that relationship has changed with Hera here, so many years later.
Yeah. Well, we've only got just a few more minutes left here. I'll make this real quick. Jason Syndulla, we've not really talked about him. He is the offspring of Hera and Kanan, allegedly. We'll have to see if there's they can have the birth certificate or whatever. But in what do you think we're gonna see? So he would be about 10 years old, right? Somewhere between 10 and 12 years old in the series, because he was conceived on Lothal right before Kanan died, I think, technically speaking, somewhere around that time. So, maybe they had one.
You've thought a lot about this, apparently.
No, I've read a lot of fan fiction about this one. But so 10 to 12 years is where we'd probably place his age. We had that one scene where we see a little hand come out trying to use the Force to pull a cup or whatever it was. And I think we speculated that was his hand. Now there's speculation maybe that was Sabine's hand. Either way, we've got we know he exists because of the epilogue of season 4, and we've seen the Lego set. We talked about the changes to the little Lego minifig there. But I guess the question is, do you think we're going to see him? In what capacity? Is he running around with Mom and Chopper? I think him and Chopper would be a good kind of matchup, right? To have somebody that doesn't put up with his crap, and Chopper, still being kind of sensitive, like a family dog kind of thing. But anyways, your thoughts, I guess, on whether or not we're going to see him.
I think we will see him. I don't know that we're going to see a lot of Hera, so I don't know that by default we'll see significantly less of Jason by default. Mm-hmm. So I think there will be some interactions there. I just don't think there will be that many. I think he'll be maybe a little bit more than a cameo, but not a whole lot more than that. There's a lot of story to unpack in all of this, and the story is about Ahsoka, Sabine, Thrawn, and maybe Ezra, right? That seems to be where the main story will be doing. All of these other things are feeding within that, and they're significant, but they're not necessarily. I think we have to get something from Jason, though. I think we'll get Kanan references, right, and their father references and things like that. So I think there's going to be moments. I just don't think they're going to be very extensive at this point.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Last question, and this is kind of a fun bonus round question.
We're going right up on the hour, man. Look at us.
We're living on the edge here. So it's on E, and we're just continuing to drive. We're not even pulling over at this point. So we mentioned in the Rise of Skywalker, we see the cameo appearance of the ghost kind of landing. At that point, Jason Syndulla is about 35 years old. Hera is about 64 years old. So my question for you, who was flying the ghost in that final battle there in the Rise of Skywalker?
Oh, Hera's still flying the ghost, and she's got the Jedi up on the cannons. No question.
Okay. I'm with you on that one.
He's doing Dad's job now.
He's doing Dad's job. Yep.
Right.
I would agree 100% on that. Very cool. Well, this is a great show. Always fun to talk about Rebels characters for me personally, and we've got a great character in this. I just hope people come to love and appreciate Hera for all the reasons we've discussed today, and they give this series a shot and really kind of find their place with her, because she's such a great character. So.
Right. And the people that we've come to appreciate really a lot, Albert, are going to be the people in our amazing live stream, like Steph, Sky, Jacob, Rob, Jeff, Skywalker's Academy, Riley, 80s Kid from the 90s, Alex, and Mike, Mr. Fisto Fury himself. Thank you all for coming out for the live stream. If you are listening to the podcast, please do come out to cantinacast.com/YouTube. We would love to invite you to hit that subscribe button and like the video if you are so inclined. We would greatly appreciate it. It helps the show out, and we'd like to hear from you. Join the chat, throw your comments up on screen. You get a call out. Yeah. What's not to love, hopefully.
What's not to love? Okay, well, if you're a Patreon member, you can stay with us. We'll be on in just a couple minutes here. Come back and do our Tatooine trading posts. I've actually got, 8 billion things there. I was trying, it was difficult just to find what I was going to talk about, what I was going to show. But then don't forget that we've also got this Sunday, we've got our final From a Certain Point of View show where we're going to talk about our top 3 moments from season 4 of Rebels. So I know we're going to have Alex will be on, Jonesy, myself. I think Lauren's going to make this one as well. Is she back by then? Nope, she's not back by then. She's still out. Okay. And then we've got Dante as well. So I think we've got maybe room for one more if anybody's in the right tiers. We're out of time, but you guys know what to do. If you guys are interested, let us know. But look for that on Sunday starting at 9 p.m. All right, Jonesy. Any final words before we get out of here? I'm doing that to stall so I can get to the end credits.
No, I totally forgot to post the link for the trading post, so I'm doing that right now.
Oh, okay. Well, Research on the fly or updates on the fly. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys very soon.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.